Okay, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Beth Strausser and I work in the policy office in the Division of Institution and Award Support at the National Science Foundation. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to the Fall 2022 NSF Virtual Grants Conference. Before we begin, we would like to take a poll to find out more about you. If you are using Zoom from a desktop browser, you may not be able to access the poll. So please be sure you are viewing this presentation from the Zoom application. If you have questions for our presenters, and we hope you do, please submit them using the Q&A function. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our website, nsfpolicyoutreach.com, in the coming weeks. And we will be sending an email announcement as soon as the sessions are posted. If you have any technical difficulties during this presentation, please send us a message using the Q&A function and someone will assist you. All right, so I want to thank you for participating in the poll. There we go. We have the results showing up there on the screen. And we truly hope that you enjoy the Fall Grants Conference. So I am now pleased to present this Directorate for STEM Education session. Our distinguished speakers today are Dr. Luis Cubano and Dr. Bonnie Green. So take it away, Luis and Bonnie.
Good afternoon. My name is Luis Cubano, and today with me is Bonnie Green. We serve as program directors in the Directorate of STEM Education at the National Science Foundation. We're going to spend the next several minutes describing the various programs and funding opportunities available at the NSF EDU Directorate. EDU's collective work spans three underlying themes. Our programs aim to enhance the preparation, increase the participation, and ensure the contributions of individuals underrepresented and underserved in the STEM enterprise, and improve STEM learning and learning environments such that all are represented both to contribute to the STEM workforce of and benefit from the industries of today and the future. This slide is a roadmap for you to see the breadth of programs at EDU. We will spend the rest of the time in this talk providing details about these programs. You will have access to these slides and you can use them to get a high-level view of all the EDU programs. The Division of Research on Learning in Formal and Informal Settings, or DRL, provides funding for foundational research to advance understanding of STEM learning and teaching. DRL also funds work in the design, implementation, and study of learning environments and the study of technologies intended to enhance the STEM learning for all students. The ISL program seeks to advance new approaches to an evidence-based understanding of the design and development of STEM learning opportunities for the public in informal environments. It provides multiple pathways for the broadening access to and engagement in STEM learning environments, advanced innovative research on and assessment of STEM learning in informal environments, and engage the public of all ages in learning STEM in informal environments. The CS for All aims to provide all U.S. students with the opportunity to participate in computer science education in their schools at the pre-K to 12 levels. Specifically, the solicitations aims to provide high school teachers with the preparation, professional development, and ongoing support they need to teach computer science courses. They also aims to provide pre-K to 8th grade teachers with the instructional materials and preparation they need to integrate computer science into their teaching, and schools and districts with the resources needed to define and evaluate multiple grade pathways in computer science. The DRK-12 program seeks to significantly enhance the learning and teaching of STEM fields by pre-K to 12 students and teachers through research and development of STEM education innovations and approaches. Projects should result in research-informed and field-tested outcomes and products that inform teaching and learning. Teachers and students who participate in this program are expected to enhance the understanding and use of STEM content, practices, and skills. iTest is an applied research and development program designed to broaden participation in STEM careers by providing pre-K through 12th grade youth with technology-rich learning experiences in formal and informal settings. While the purpose of the RETTL program is to fund exploratory and synergistic research in emerging technologies for teaching and learning in the future, the program accepts proposals that focus on learning, teaching, and a combination of both. The scope of the program is broad, including teaching and learning in STEM and the foundation areas that enable STEM. And now I'll pass the slides to Bonnie to talk about the DUE programs.
Thank you, Luis. The Division of Undergraduate Education, or DUE, supports the design, development, and study of innovative STEM learning environments to improve learning for all undergraduate students. So this includes people coming from 2-year and 4-year institutions, as well as other environments that would be post-secondary. One of the programs in DUE is the ATE program, which focuses on the education of technicians at 2-year community and technical colleges. The IUS program is a very extensive program in DUE that promotes new evidence-based intervention and use-inspired research to improve undergraduate education. This includes focusing on engaging student learning, as well as improving and transforming community into better learning environments. The STEM program supports the success of low-income students with financial need. So it provides both scholarship as well as helping us to understand what is best needed to support low-income students. This is for both community colleges, 4-year institutions, as well as graduate programs for low-income students. The Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program, often referred to as the Noyce Program, recruits and prepares STEM undergraduates and professionals for teaching careers in STEM. This includes helping and support pre-service teachers, as well as helping people who have been in the STEM workforce transition into teaching certification at the K-12 level, and supporting master teachers. Additionally, the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program also provides research to better understand how do we best prepare STEM teachers for the K-12 environment. Advancing innovation and impact in undergraduate STEM education at 2-year institutions of higher education is designed exactly for that, to support approaches to advance inclusive and equitable STEM education practices at 2-year institutions. NSF particularly encourages submissions to the disciplines of national priorities such as quantum information science, artificial intelligence, robotics, process engineering, and cybersecurity. Now, I'll turn it back to Luis.
Now, let us look at some of the Division of Graduate Education programs. The STEM ED PRF provides individual and institutional support for the training of STEM education postdoctoral fellows, while the Graduate Research Fellowship Program provides financial support for graduate students at the master's and doctoral level. The IGE program supports the testing and validation of approaches to STEM graduate education, and the NRT program supports the development of skills needed to pursue STEM careers in graduate students. The CyberCorps SFS program provides funding to institutions to support undergraduate and graduate students pursuing cybersecurity education. And the Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace program welcomes proposals that advance the field of cybersecurity and privacy. Now we will look at programs that are supported by the Division of Equity for Excellence in STEM. EES provides support to grow the innovation in U.S. STEM workforce by supporting the inclusion and success of individuals currently underrepresented in STEM. The Advanced program addresses systematic gender-based inequities impacting STEM faculty with systematic change strategies, while the AJEC program aims to increase the number of minority faculty in STEM. Meanwhile, the CREST program, which is divided into three different programs, provides awards to increase research infrastructure for eligible minority-serving institutions, while the HBCU RISE Awards support the development of research capabilities at HBCUs that offer doctoral degrees in science and engineering disciplines, while the CREST Postdoctoral Research Fellowships Awards provide research experience and training to postdocs at active CREST centers. The HBCU UP program supports approaches to prepare HBCU undergraduates for the STEM workforce and STEM faculty, research capacity, and professional development. The LSAP program enables successful transfer of students from 2-year to 4-year institutions, also known as the Bridges to the Baccalaureate. It also helps increase the undergraduate access to high-quality research experiences and facilitates the transition of students into graduate programs, also known as the Bridges to the Doctorate. The NSF Includes program supports broadening participation efforts at scale through collaboration infrastructure. And the TCOP program supports the creation of new degrees or disciplines at tribal colleges and universities. It also supports the enhancement of departments or programs, research grants for faculty, and capacity building at those institutions. And now back to Bonnie.
Thank you, Luis. So up till this point, we've been talking about programs that are specific to each of the 4 divisions under the Directorate of EDU. Now I'm going to be talking about programs that span across multiple divisions within EDU. The first that I'm going to talk about is Faculty Early Career Development Program, or the Career Grant. The Faculty Early Career Development Program is a foundation-wide activity that offers the National Science Foundation's most prestigious awards in support of early career faculty who have shown the potential to serve as academic role models in research and education and to lead advances in the mission of their departments or organizations. Activities pursued by early career faculty should build on a firm foundation for a lifetime of leadership in the integration of education and research. NSF encourages submissions of career proposals from early career faculty of all career eligible organizations, and especially encourages women, members of underrepresented minority groups, and persons with disabilities to apply. EDU Core Research Program, that is the ECR program, invites proposals for fundamental research that advances knowledge in one or more of the 3 research tracks: research on STEM learning and learning environments, research on broadening participation in STEM fields, and research on workforce development. To further EDU's core research, we have a Building Capacity in STEM Education Research, also called the BICSR program, which is designed to help people both early career, mid-career, and other components, levels of your career, to enter into EHR's core research program. Improving Undergraduate STEM Education, the Hispanic Serving Institution Program, which is abbreviated the HSI program, is designed to build upon what IUS, the Improving Undergraduate STEM Education, is, with specific focus on HSI institutions to help, again, with building capacity. And the Racial Equity in STEM Education program is, again, across Directorate, with the goal of focusing on addressing systemic racism that is experienced at all areas, pre-K through college, graduate school, to improve STEM education outcomes. NSF is specifically interested in supporting the development of industries of the future that include biotechnology, artificial intelligence, quantum information, advanced manufacturing, and wireless technology. I would like to conclude with encouraging you to please volunteer to serve as reviewers for any of the programs that we've talked about today, and make sure to contact the program officers of the specific programs you are interested in for detailed information about programs. And now we will open up the floor to questions. Thank you for your time.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Bonnie and Luis, for that great presentation, and really letting people know all the various wonderful programs that EDU has for people to apply to. So, okay, so starting off in that vein, somebody had asked what year. So what we saw on the slides that at the top, when you were talking about the various solicitations, you had the solicitation number and the month of when it was submissions are due, but not the years. So what years are those deadlines for?
So every solicitation, can you guys hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Every solicitation will be different. Some solicitations are yearly. Some solicitations are 1 year yes, 1 year no. So for example, you might submit in 2022 and 2023 and 2024. Some of them you have to submit in 2022 and then 2024. So you really need to look at the specific instructions for the program that you are applying to.
The other thing that I would add to that is that it's important to recognize that solicitations change, right? And that's not normally announced until the actual change has taken place. And so as you work on a proposal, it's always important to make sure that you are looking at the most recent solicitation. I will tell you that one of the times I was working on a proposal for a submission, and the solicitation changed in the process of, while we were writing it before we actually submitted it. It actually worked in our favor, but definitely make sure that you're always taking a look at the most recent solicitation as you move forward. And each solicitation will be very clear as to when the submissions are due. There are some programs that across NSF that have no deadlines as well. So that will also be clear in the solicitation.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so next question is, within DUE, which grant or grants would you recommend for infrastructure costs to build capacity for STEM learning and hands-on training experiences? And then they put an example of lab equipment or machines that are a one-time purchase.
So if they're at the undergraduate level, the IUS program does cover costs of materials that might be necessary in order to engage in educational practices. But it's important to keep in mind that the goal of IUS is not just to supply materials. The goal of IUS is to ask and answer questions and advance our understanding of how to maximize student learning. However, sometimes that requires equipment. And so if it's at the undergraduate level, IUS would be the appropriate program.
I'll add to that if you are in a Hispanic serving institution, then you want to apply to the IU's HSI.
Okay. All right. Okay, great.
And that also would be true if you're from if you're from an HBCU, the HBCU up has particular funding for equipment as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you both. All right. So next question is, and I think this is a great just overall question too. How can PIs best position themselves for a successful STEM application? So the person is specifically asking about STEM, but you might want to. It's probably applicable, kind of across the board. There are tips I'm sure that you guys can share. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I'm fortunate enough to not only be a current program officer in STEM, but I'm a prior PI in STEM as well. And so I do know the program well. So there are 3 tracks, track 1, 2, and 3. There are some differences across the tracks. Track 1 is if your institution has never had an STEM grant. That doesn't mean that you have to apply for an STEM grant. My institution never had an NSF grant at all, and we went big and, go big or go home, and we went straight for the track 3. For the track 3, the only way that you're going to be competitive is you need multiple institutions that you're partnering with, and there has to be a theoretical framework of what you're doing. You have to be adding to the literature, asking a research question regarding how to maximize student success in low-income environments. That is not required for tracks 1 and track 2, primarily because it's nearly impossible with the amount of funding to have a large enough sample size to ask and answer most research questions in that space. However, you still really want to be focused on what's the challenge facing your institution and your students, and what kind of questions can you ask, and what kind of support can you provide them to help them be successful. And so I would say for STEM as well as for IUS and probably HSI as well, and many of the HBCU grants, really focusing on what is a problem that you're attempting to solve. How do you intend to solve that particular problem? How will you know when you solve it, right? You need a really strong evaluation or research plan. And then what will you do once you've figured out that you've solved it? Who will you share it with? Seems to be really important in order to be competitive. For all of the grants, you are welcome to write a 1 to 3 page summary and submit it to a program officer for feedback. And for STEM, I absolutely encourage you to do that.
Okay.
I will say that I will encourage you to contact the program officer for whatever you're applying. I mean, that's going to be vital to understand the program and what they're looking for.
Great. Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. So we have a question about faculty that are interested in applying to IUS, and how can they identify workshops or training that might help them prepare a strong proposal?
AAAS provides workshops for IUS specifically for helping people prepare for an IUS submission. The Breaking Barriers series out of Cheney University. It's an NSF-funded activity that also provides very useful information, and they have archived information on IUS specifically. And if you are from a minority serving institution, oftentimes organizations like QEM also provide workshops. That having been said, if you're in the behavioral sciences, we will be working on a series of live workshops over the next few months, and one of them is specifically on IUS as well. So you can reach out to me or the IUS leads. You can find that on the NSF website and ask for specific information as well.
Yeah, and if you go to the website, they're going to have office hours You will see in the website, it will have announcements and they will tell you when the office hours are. If you're applying to the IU's HSI program, they have a resource hub that also provides workshops for that solicitation.
Okay, great. That's helpful information. And actually, I see that there's a question from Monica related to the IU solicitation. So there are 4 program officers listed there. And do you have any suggestions about how best to reach out with questions, given that there are multiple program officers listed?
That's a great question. So for IU's is, I don't know if it's the largest program in EDU, but it's certainly one of the largest. And we have dozens of program officers. And so when you take a look at the IU's website, you will see us divided by, biology, physics, chemistry. You'll see me under social sciences. You'll also see things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, institutional and community transformation, and methodology. And you'll see different program officers' names there. My recommendation would be to take a look at to see if there's an intersection between what you're working on. So for example, I'm also in data science. And if there is multiple names, just pick one for IU specifically and send it out to. The beautiful thing is if you've picked wrong, they'll forward it on to the best person. Or if, we're busy, one of us is busy, we'll forward it on to the next person. What you don't want to do is to send it to more than one person, whether either in group email or individually. It just creates stress for program officers, and you don't want to do that. So just pick one and send it off to that person. We love to hear from you. Oh, and if you don't hear back from us in like a few days, it's probably because we're human and we've missed it. Don't feel badly about resending another one, especially to me.
Yes, I hear you, Bonnie. I'm in the, as I said, I'm in the policy office at NSF, and we get, dozens of questions in every week. And there's only 6 of us in the office, in the policy office. So so we appreciate everybody's patience with us, but we'll get you a response, definitely. Okay, all right. So let me go on to question from Janie Mitchell. She's at a emerging HSI PUI, primarily undergraduate institution, and would like to work with a community college that is an HSI to build a transfer pipeline for students moving into STEM majors at their institution. So she's wondering if they can apply for an HSI opportunity if the sub-awardee is an HSI.
Yeah, if they're both HSIs, they can apply. I would say that also look into the Bridges to the Back program. So you might actually have 2 different opportunities and see which one better fits what you're trying to do.
Okay, all right. Bonnie, anything to add to that? Or so what if the prime is not an HSI, but the sub-awardee is? So Louise, I think that might be what she's asking.
Yeah, right. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that the person who does the submitting, that the lead institution needs to be an HSI. Mm-hmm. And so if somebody is emerging, that creates, that limits those particular opportunities unless you can flip it. Of course, within IUS itself, we do have a diversity, equity, and inclusion pathway ourselves. And so for people who are emerging institutions, that is another option.
Yeah, and for the Bridges, you don't have to worry about being an emerging HSI. So that's another solution there too.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. So good. So they have some options there, which is great. All right. Okay, let's go to Susan Ferrari. She is wondering if there's any advice program staff you guys can share on the race and equity in STEM program. Any lessons learned from the early cycles there, and any recommendations you might have for PIs considering that program?
Well, fortunately, I was part of the program for its first year and got to see it in action, which is really exciting. I think that what is important, which aligns with what the last question was asking, is that as you are working in various environments, you need to be working with, not on, a particular group that has experienced systemic barriers that might be negatively impacting their ability to progress through STEM. And so those partnerships really need to be authentic. This sometimes becomes a challenge in putting it down on paper, in that, the partnership may be authentic, but sometimes, how do you measure authenticity? And so one of the things that I would definitely recommend is that as you work through the process, again, send in now the racial equity program asks for a one-pager, but submit a one-pager and get feedback from one of the program officers that is working on racial equity to make sure that you're moving in that right direction. But I think the biggest lesson learned from the racial equity program description is that when NSF says we're looking for big and bold and new and transformative, that's what we're looking for. And so it's unlike a lot of the other programs across our directorate in that there really is a lot more flexibility in what you can do, how you can do it, who you can do it with, as long as you're not, coming from above down to fix the beings, that you're really working at identifying and moving forward in an authentic partnership with whomever you're working with.
Great. All right, thank you. And let me, I'm going to skip to Jennifer Taylor's question, because I think a couple of times now we have you've talked about submitting a 1 or 2 page summary to the program officer. So she's asking, it was specifically for STEM, but I think just also in general, if people want to submit a 1 or 2 page summary of an idea to a PO for feedback, is there a general timeline or a deadline for when to do that?
That really is a great question. So the one thing is you want to make sure that you have enough time to enact any feedback that might be provided to you. And so, and that differs by institution on how early you have to have the proposal in. So obviously work from reverse on your end. But I would say in general, it's reasonable to think that if you submit a one pager, that you should hear back within 2 to 3 days with regard to a schedule of when you can meet. And like anything, we all have our ups and our downs in our schedule. The nice thing about STEM though is, like, let's say you were to submit something to me last week. I was like busy the whole week with a particular project, and I would have just forwarded it on to somebody else. And so I think it's reasonable to think that you'll probably get to meet with a program officer within 2 weeks, 3 at the most. And if something's going on in that particular program officer's schedule, they'll probably forward it on to somebody else.
Okay, great. That's great advice, Bonnie. Thank you. All right. So moving on, question from Marie Gorman. What is the best way to find out about opportunities in, these various programs that you have been discussing today?
So basically the solicitation will tell you the information that you need. There's nothing like behind closed doors or anything like that. So everything is public. Visit the websites to get the latest information. And if you want to have specific questions, contact the program officer.
Great.
I would add to that, there is a listserv for our directorate, and that you can get sign up for automatic messages, and that oftentimes helps because it will tell you when a new solicitation has come out. Also, depending on what program you're interested in. So, for example, NOIS, the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program, there is a its own specific listserv that you can engage in, and it tells you about all of the workshops and everything along those lines. And so, if you think that there's a particular area where you're keenly interested, just look on the website and you should be able to get to a point where you can sign up for information. The last thing that I would recommend on this is if you're really interested in a particular program itself, consider volunteering to be a reviewer. I think that it really helps provide useful information on what's being looked for and how the process works. And we're always looking for new reviewers.
Right. Yes, exactly. It takes a village to review all of those proposals. So definitely, that's great advice. All right. Well, and you, Bonnie, you just mentioned about NOIS. So Tanya had a question about, is it possible to apply for a NOIS and STEM LP grant in the same year? It appears there might be some overlap in the programs.
There's oftentimes overlap, for example, between STEM and NOIS. They're both scholarship programs. I was just talking to a PI earlier today who is preparing for an STEM and an IUS. And so it absolutely is possible to apply for multiple grants, and that there probably will be some overlap, right? Because there's overlap in the passion that you have, the students that you serve, the research questions you may be asking and answering. The key to it is that you want to make sure that the budgets are independent of each other. Right. So that's important. You don't want to be double dipping. That's illegal. So you want to make sure that the budgets are independent. And you also want to make sure that as the proposals come through, that if one is funded and the other one isn't, that you can still move forward in those two spaces. But it is quite possible that there might be overlapping research questions and even measurements and protocol that might be very similar in those two, but maybe you're working with two different populations as a possibility. So similarity is okay. Overlap in budget is not okay. And so the other thing to keep in mind is that the PAPG has just been updated, and there are new and specific guidelines with regard to time and effort. And so you want to make sure that if you got both of them funded, that the time and effort balances out for your staff.
Right. Yes. And definitely. And I'll just add on to that too, that so the policy is that, the same proposal cannot be submitted, twice at the same time, basically for consideration by NSF. So, it obviously, right. If it's the same proposal, you can't submit a duplicate. But like you were saying, Bonnie, if there is, or it's substantially similar, again, that would be against policy. But if there is, there is some overlap there, that is probably okay, as long as they basically are, their own kind of standalone proposals. Yeah. So.
And what's interesting from that is, though they might be their standalone proposal running independently, there might be overlapping staff, right? And right. You might pull information from multiple grants into a single presentation or a single publication. These things are all completely appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Okay, all right. So Susie has a question about, are there brand new programs coming out in 2023 specifically for community colleges?
We're not allowed to talk about new programs that are in the pipeline. However, there was just recently one of the newest programs in DUE in the Division of Undergraduate Education is specifically for community colleges. And it was one of the ones presented. And so I definitely encourage you to take a look at that. And if you can't track it down, feel free to email me and I'll get you in touch with the right people.
Okay, all right, great. All right, so Charu has a question about, can the partnerships in the MCA be with institutions abroad? And I don't know, does that ring a bell with MCA with you guys? Okay, all right. So maybe Charu, if you can put in the Q&A what that acronym stands for, and then we can see if we can get that answered for you.
I will say that in general, you can do partnerships with institutions abroad.
Yeah, right. There's not a right, exactly, Luis. That's good point. So there, as far as NSF general policy goes, there is not a overall prohibition on collaborating with foreign institutions. So, but again, there may be requirements or eligibility restrictions in a particular solicitation. So you need to kind of just pay attention to to the guidelines in the solicitation that you're applying to. Yeah.
The other thing that's important to note, regardless of what you're doing, there needs to be some sort of theoretical justification or some practical justification for why you're choosing what you're doing. Right now, I'm fortunate enough to be program officer on some programs in Hawaii, but they don't require a site visit. And, I'd love to go to Hawaii, but that's not why you partner with Hawaii, so that you can go there. And so it's critically important that you be able to make an argument as to any partnership, why this location, why in this fashion, whether it's within the United States or outside.
Great, good point. Okay, Melanie is asking if you have a project but you're unclear which program might be the best fit, are POs available to discuss that?
Absolutely. Pick a PO that makes sense to you. I would say the number one reason why I get contacted is because of challenges between figuring out IUS or ECR in the space that I hang out. And program officers would love to help you. Sorry, Luis, go ahead.
No, I was going to say yes. Feel free to contact us.
Right. Operators are standing by, right? As they say. Okay, all right. A question from Heather. Her organization is a science museum with a robust science educator program. It's the Exploratorium Teacher Institute, and they have a social justice focus. So she's wondering which programs in EDU might be the best fit for them or for her organization.
Depending on the type of question that's being asked, ASL as an informal STEM learning environment might make sense. Noise track 4 might also make sense. That's a research question track for teacher preparation or keeping teachers up to date. So those two certainly could make sense.
Okay. Great. All right. And, oh, great. And I see Charu she had the question about the MCA and foreign organizations. And so that's the mid-career advancement. And Susan helpfully jumped in and said that the question is addressed by question 17 in the FAQ for the mid-career advancement. So, so great. So we got that answered, and thank you to my friend Susan there for helping out a colleague. That was a great example of collaboration in practice. Yeah. Okay. All right. So so Jan has a question, and I think I'm gonna answer this, and then if you want to add anything, Luis or Bonnie, but she's asking, can you detail some of the most significant recent changes to any of the solicitations covered today? What I would say to that is that there's all the NSF funding opportunities follow a standard format. So at the very beginning, there is a section on important information and revision notes. And so in that section, that will tell you what are the most important revisions that have been made to that solicitation, for that year. So I would recommend just looking at that revision notes section at the beginning of each solicitation. And I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that. Yeah. Okay. All right. So William K is asking, can you talk more about how the focus on industries of the future is relevant to plan submission to any EDU programs? So focus on industries of the future.
So for example, the CREST program, and that's one of the areas that we are encouraging PIs to look at the document and to identify areas that they think that they can develop at their institution. The list of areas that are included is long, so it can be cybersecurity, it can be advanced materials, it can be plant genetics, quantum science, semiconductors, clean energy. So please look at the list that is in the document. If you look it up in the web, the document will come up, and it's a long list of areas of science that we are encouraging people to submit applications in.
Okay. All right. Great. And Alicia has a question about, can you talk more about the types of projects that would be appropriate for the cyber programs?
So I'm not directly related with the cyber programs, but I do work in data science and IUs. And really the key is for most of the programs in EDU, you're either solving a problem that needs to be solved through STEM education, or you're and through alterations in STEM education, or you're asking a research question that gets at how do we maximize student success, regardless of the age group or whatever population. And so one of the things that I often say is that what you don't want to be doing is you don't want to be chasing money. You want to be chasing an idea. You want to be chasing an answer. You want to be chasing a problem. You want to be chasing an idea. And though NSF has these guiding principles of hey, we really need to move forward in these particular spaces right here and right now for the betterment of our nation. That doesn't mean that there aren't other research questions or problems that you might be seeing locally that are not also available for funding. And so that would be my recommendation with regard to cyber or any discipline that you're working in. Oh, and don't start with those big problems like, oh, well, we have not enough people majoring in this, right? Like really get it much more clear and tied into what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you plan on doing it.
Got it. All right. There are a couple of questions. I'm not sure we can actually go into this because I think it might still be close hold, but we'll answer it anyway, or we'll ask it anyway, I should say. So a couple questions about STEM. Is there a new solicitation expected for STEM this year? And if so, what are the dates?
If I knew the answer to that question, I couldn't answer it anyway, but if so, there is, and Beth, you probably know exactly the dates, right? The new solicitation has to be put out 90 days before. Yeah, 90 days before the end of the next call. That having been said, I've only been at NSF for 2.5 years now, and for the most part, the dates stay around the same time, but they don't always. So, just kind of keep updated about taking a look at this. The one thing that I can say, though, is that because the White House has come out and explicitly stated STEM, I think it's fairly safe to say the program is not going away, at least anytime soon. But exactly where it might be going is still, it's not just still evolving; it will be perpetually evolving, because one of the things that we pride ourselves in EDU and across the agency is that we evaluate what we're doing, what's being effective, and use that data to make improvements.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. And yes, definitely, as I wanted to just emphasize, as you said, Bonnie, we give at least 90 days from the time that the solicitation of funding opportunity is posted to when the proposals are due. So there's always that 3-month window for people to prepare appropriately. Yeah. Okay. Monica has a question about, are there any opportunities which support postdoctoral fellows from underrepresented groups?
So the answer is yes. One example is the CREST Postdoctoral Research Fellowship, but there are other programs out there also. So yeah, I'm the program officer for that program, so you can feel free to contact me.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, Luis. I'm just going to skip ahead here just to ask what I think a bunch of people might be interested in knowing. For a question from Linda: how do you get onto the listserv?
I don't remember.
It's probably posted somewhere, right, on the EDU website.
EDU website. Right. And that's where I remember I signed up for it before I even applied for this position. And I remember just stumbling upon it. And so it is somewhere on the EDU website. And if you can't find it, feel free to email me and I will find out.
Mm-hmm. I think on each of the web landing pages, there's some kind of like contact us or some button, and it might be listed there. So, yeah. Okay, so Douglas says some of the folks are in fields that are not included in the formal list of STEM fields, even though they use STEM, in their academic and clinical research. So, for example, speech language pathology and audiology. So, is there any suggestions you have about those folks, applying possibly to EDU?
So a lot of the behavioral and social sciences, which includes communication studies and linguistics, fall under NSF funding. The key, though, is where is that dividing line? So I'm an experimental psychologist, and so, I'm on the hardcore science end of my counseling friends might have just taken offense to that, from the hardcore science end of psychology, not the clinical side, right? NSF does not fund the clinical side of anything. Whether it's psychology, sociology, speech and language pathology. However, the science of speech and language and communication and linguistics and cognitive function and cognitive science, all of that absolutely falls within the funding of NSF. And so if you are working in broadening participation or opening up participation, helping students to be successful in this space, or understanding what the opportunities are in that space, and it's not on the clinical side of your discipline, it would indeed fall under EDU.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. Let me see here. So we are almost at the end of time, but let me ask this question. So is a PI more successful if that person comes from an educational institution, or, can anyone apply, somebody from a nonprofit, for example, and does that matter in the evaluation of an application?
Right. For some programs like NOICE and STEM, it needs to come from an institution of higher education, but they can partner with other people. For other programs, it really doesn't matter. And we fund people from both nonprofit organizations, for-profit, institutions of higher ed, on and on and on.
Yeah, just make sure that you look at the eligibility criteria, and that will let you know who can apply for that solicitation.
Great. Okay. All right. Let me see here. I think we probably have time for one more question. Let's go with Lucas, because I think some people might also have this question. So the racial equity in STEM education solicitation says that they can also fund awards made through the career program, but the deadlines are different. So do they need to decide which one they need to apply to, or do they contact the program officers to ask about that? How does that work?
If you're applying for a career grant, follow the career grant deadlines, but you can apply for a career grant and it could be under racial equity, it could be under IUS, it could be under ECR, depending on what your work is, et cetera, on, but follow the career deadlines, and feel free to reach out to a career program officer for additional details.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I think we got to most of the questions that came in. So thank you all for submitting all of those great questions and joining us today. We would greatly appreciate if you can complete our survey so we can get your feedback. And there is a link to that survey in the chat. And we really do, take your responses seriously. They help us shape future conference sessions. If you would like to view the recording of this session, you can find it on the Policy Outreach website or our YouTube channel. And as an FYI, there are 2 more sessions being held today from 3 to 4 p.m. The Directorate for Biological Sciences and the Directorate for Computer and Information Science and Engineering updates. So we invite you to attend, either one of those if you are interested. So again, with that, I would say if we didn't get to your question, please, I believe in the chat, they put links to some FAQs, and there's information out on the EDU website. And certainly, as Bonnie and Luis was saying, if you have a question, please reach out to one of the program officers in EDU. They're more than happy to help answer your questions or direct you in the right to the right area. So, okay, so I want to thank you again for participating, and hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day. All right, thank you very much.